It's a rare game where the LA Kings can't close one out. We've got all the details, analysis, and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 18 years. We were doing a podcast before it was cool. And also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff presented by Allstate begins with 4 first-round games December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Well, the LA Kings continue their East Coast road trip with a game in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. It was game 31 of the NHL season, and the Kings were playing game 4 of their 7-game road trip. Kings looking to continue to play a similar game, which they played in their last game in New York on Saturday when they rolled over the New York Rangers by a score of 4-1. As for the Kings lineup in this one, a familiar one. Kings continuing with that 11-7 setup with the 11 forwards and the 7 defensemen for a 6th straight game. It is also the 2nd straight game we saw this lineup, minus Trevor Moore, who is still day-to-day with the upper body injury. So we would see a top line of Andre Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, along with Alex Turcotte for a 2nd straight game. Second line is still Quentin Byfield with Tanner Jeannot and Warren Foegele. The third line, Philip Deneau centering Kevin Fiala and Alex Laferriere. The fourth line, Samuel Hellenius at center, along with Akil Thomas, and then a rotating cast of forwards from the group of other wingers. As far as the defense, exactly the same as we've seen of late. Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov on the top pairing. Joel Edmondson and Brant Clark, the second pairing. Jacob Moverar and Jordan Spence on the third pairing. And Kyle Burrows as the extra defenseman. Darcy Kuemper would start his 2nd straight game in net. David Rittich would be the backup. Big question for me going into this game, would the Kings continue to show the energy right from the start that would lead them to another victory? Well, they would in this game in Pittsburgh. Got off to a great start. Matter of fact, just 33 seconds into the game, Andre Kopitar, of course, to Adrian Kempe, and the Kings grabbed a very early 1-0 lead. LA would get a couple of power play chances, but couldn't add to the lead. Pittsburgh, after a slow start, had a pretty solid opening period. They would bounce back and kind of control the first period despite trailing 1-0 thanks to Kings goalie Darcy Kuemper, who kept the Penguins off the scoreboard, and the Kings had that 1-0 lead after one period. Second period, the Kings would play a much better period. It was more even as far as time in the Penguin zone and the amount of time that Pittsburgh spent in the LA zone. And LA would give up the next goal, however, to even the game at 1-1. But the Kings would reclaim the lead. Vladislav Gavrikov with a pass off the boards. Alex Turcotte would get on his skates and speed down the ice, track down the puck, and get a breakaway and score on a beautiful wrist shot. And the Kings would have a 2-1 lead going into the third period. In the third, Kings were leading with about 5 minutes left, and a rare defensive coverage mistake would leave a Penguin all alone to pick his spot, which he did. And we would be tied at 2-2. The game would go into overtime. Penguins leading goal scorer Rickard Rakell deflected in a shot past Darcy Kuemper. And the Kings lose 3-2 in overtime. LA dropping to 13-0-2 in games in which they led going into the third period. 18-9-4 overall, as they did get a point with the overtime loss, their 40th point of the season. As for the game stats in this one, pretty close. Shots on goal were exactly even at 31 apiece. Power plays, each team over 3. Face-offs favored the Kings 32-27. Hits favored the Penguins 18-15. And block shots favored Pittsburgh 17-14. But otherwise, a fairly even game for the most part. So what was good for the Kings from a team standpoint in this close loss? Well, the start. The Kings jumping out to that 1-0 lead on their first shift. Kings cycling the puck and finishing it off with Andre Kopitar connecting with Adrian Kempe, and that's certainly been a winning formula for the Kings of late. The Kings penalty kill continues to be excellent. They have now killed off, with the 3 penalties they killed off against Pittsburgh, they've killed off 18 of the last 20 power play chances against. And the goaltending was solid. We will get more into Darcy Kuemper's night coming up. As for what was not so good for the Kings from a team standpoint, obviously overtimes have not been good for the LA Kings if you've been paying attention. Now, they haven't played in a lot of them. But in games that go beyond regulation, this season, the Kings are 0-4. 0-3 now in overtime, and they are 0-1 in a shootout. Kings head coach Jim Hiller has been pretty innovative with a lot of areas with the team, thinking outside the box, tinkering with things. He might want to think about doing that for overtime for the LA Kings. I like Philip Deneau, but he has no business being out on the ice in overtime, skating 3-on-3. He's very limited offensively. He's not the fastest guy in the world. I think the Kings need to be a little bit more creative with the players they're putting out there on the ice in overtime. Kempe and Kopitar, sure. Gavrikov, okay. But guys like Brant Clark, Alex Turcotte, Quentin Byfield, Alex Ferrier, some of the younger, more creative guys, I think need to get some time on ice when the Kings go to overtime. The Kings had a couple of bad defensive breakdowns that led directly to the 2 goals that Pittsburgh scored in regulation. The Kings have not had many of those at all lately. This was a little bit more reminiscent of some of the earlier games for the Kings where they had some lapses in defense. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more specifically about what those lapses were. The Kings power play still struggling, 0-3 in this one. To be fair, really 0-2. They did have about 30, 40 seconds, I think, of power play time after they skated 4-on-4. But still, the Kings on the season are now 5 for 52 on the power play on the road. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. The Kings have a total of 13 power play goals on the season. Only 2 other teams have fewer in the NHL, the Ducks and the Islanders. Honestly, at this point, I think I would just tell my defenseman, anytime you have a chance to shoot the puck on net, do it. And we'll just crash the net and try and get traffic. The passing it around and looking for the fancy play, it's not working. It's not working. So go back to the absolute basics. It couldn't be any worse. It really couldn't. Quote of the game comes from Kings head coach Jim Hiller, courtesy of friend of the show, Zach Dooley, the Kings Insider, LAKingsInsider.com. This is what head coach Jim Hiller had to say on the Kings not being able to close this one out. He said, quote, "Third periods have been our best, I think. That's been the trend anyway for a while, and it was not tonight. We relied on Darcy way too much. They got some energy with the second goal. They tied it, and they had a lot of chances, too many," end quote. So my big takeaway from this loss, obviously it was surprising to see the Kings not close this one out. We are so used to seeing the Kings win these close 1-goal games, and obviously they aren't going to win them all, but it still was surprising against a team that isn't one of the top teams in the NHL, a Pittsburgh team that is struggling to get into a playoff position. Pittsburgh was averaging giving up close to 4 goals per game. They are not a good defensive team. They're not a good goaltending team, but the Kings only scored twice. The Penguins goalie Alex Nedeljkovic had a few nice saves, but nothing compared to what Darcy Kuemper had to do. Both teams had a decent number of good scoring chances. The Kings failed on theirs because of a lack of execution. The Penguins failed on theirs because of Darcy Kuemper. There was an example of this late in the second period on the same play, back-to-back boom, boom play. Kevin Fiala and Tanner Jeannot missed wide open nets with the goalie down and out of position. Jeannot missed from the left side, and then Fiala got the rebound and missed from the right side. Obviously, you're not going to score on every chance you get, but those kinds of chances, if you can't score on those, it usually comes back to bite you. And frankly, the Kings aren't good enough offensively to let some of those kind of opportunities go by. So combine the defensive breakdowns with some big missed opportunities, and in the end, the Kings can't close it out. They do get a point out of it. If you're going to play a poor game, you can still get a point out of it. I guess it's not a complete loss, but Kings should have got 2 points out of this one. And unfortunately did not get the job done. Up next, we'll look at some of the individual players who did and didn't play well for the Kings. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Bilt Rewards. If you're a renter, you need to listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Bilt, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Redeem points towards flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in the program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Bilt members. Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNHL. BILT. Make sure to use our link so they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. And the Stanley Cup Final, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in those top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. You can find what you're looking for in the right policy to keep your financial legacy safe and your family's needs safe. Select Quotes is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while Select Quotes licensed insurance agents work with you to tailor your life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Go to selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL today to get started. That's selectquote.com/LockedOnNHL. Let's get into some of the individual players for the Kings in the loss against the Pittsburgh Penguins. We start with the goaltender, Darcy Kuemper. Came in 3-0 since returning from his latest injury. I thought he was fantastic in this game. The Penguins could have scored 5-6 goals in regulation if not for how well Darcy Kuemper played. Pittsburgh had some point-blank, grade A scoring chances, and Kuemper denied most of them, while a few others were just Pittsburgh not being able to finish on him. But for the goals he allowed, both the goals in regulation came as a result of defensive breakdowns. On the first goal, defenseman Brandt Clarke jumped up in the play while the Kings were changing behind the play. The last forward back was Kevin Fiala. He didn't help to get back and cover for Clarke. It wasn't quite as obvious a play as it would have seemed because, again, he was coming on the ice late. But he has to recognize the situation immediately as he's coming on the ice, understand that a defenseman has jumped up in the play, and that as the last forward back, he's got to play a more defensive position. He didn't. After a turnover, the pass goes ahead, and now it's a 2-on-1, and Pittsburgh scored on it. The other breakdown was even worse. In the third period, two Kings players went to cover one Pittsburgh player down low and left a defenseman wide open at the top of the faceoff dot, Matt Grzelcyk. He got the puck and had all day to try and pick a spot, and he did to tie it up. So two poor defensive breakdowns for the LA Kings led directly to goals, and that was certainly unfortunate. As for the overtime game winner that Darcy Kuemper allowed, it goes in off a deflection, and there's not much you can do about that. None of the goals to me were on Kuemper. I thought he made way too many great saves to put really any kind of blame on him at all in this one. He finished with 28 saves on 31 shots. Overall in the season, Darcy Kuemper now 7-2-4 on the season. Alex Turcotte, while I think Kuemper was overall a positive for LA, I thought the biggest positive, though, for the Kings was, individually anyway, Alex Turcotte. Going into the season, I was just hoping that he could stay healthy and show that he could be an NHL contributor, probably a fourth-line player. He's showing that he might well be a lot more than that. He had the go-ahead goal in the second period, showed great anticipation and speed and great finishing touch. After a pass out of the zone by defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov goes off the boards, Turcotte reads the play, shoots down the ice at full speed, takes the puck in stride, breaks in on a breakaway, and scores on a very nice wrist shot. So we've seen him score on two very nice shots, 2 games in a row. Now, I know Jim Hiller has a tough decision on his hands when Trevor Moore comes back from his injury and where he's going to move Alex Turcotte if he decides to do that. And I realize it's only a couple of games, but I think, you know, Moore doesn't have to be on the top line. I know they're trying to get him going. Leading goal scorer from a season ago, not quite having that kind of season to say the least. But I would not be at all disappointed to see Alex Turcotte stay on the top line for now and see Trevor Moore on the second line and move Tanner Jeannot down to the fourth line. I know Tanner Jeannot has played well. I know he does a lot of things that aren't necessarily going to wind up on the score sheet, or at least, he does some things that can contribute to goals. But, the situation now is the Kings, like I mentioned, they're a bit offensively challenged. They need all the firepower they can get in their top six. And Jeannot is just the odd man out. And he can still contribute on the fourth line, doing some of the things he's doing. But I think let's keep Alex Turcotte on the top line, move Trevor Moore in on the second line, and move Jeannot down to the fourth line. That's what I would do. We'll see how it turns out. But Alex Turcotte showing why he was a top 5 pick in 2019. He grew up playing amongst the best players of his age group, right? Playing in the World Juniors, playing with some real elite players that are now guys that have turned into NHL stars. So he's not a guy who's overwhelmed playing on the top line with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, I don't think. And when he gets chances, he's shown he's not afraid or unable to finish on those chances that he's getting. He's got 4 goals and 12 points in the season, but if he can stay up on the top line, I think he can produce. I think he can put up some pretty decent numbers. We'll see how it all plays out. And, nothing is set in stone right now. If Trevor Moore does come back and they move Turcotte back down to the fourth line, he could always go back up at some point. But overall, super encouraged by what we've seen from Alex Turcotte. He's given me, I think, more than I was expecting to see already from him. I thought he could be a solid fourth line player. I thought he could certainly equal the production of a guy like Blake Lizotte, who we saw playing for Pittsburgh in this game. And I think he's been a very big positive. And I'm really encouraged by what the potential is for Alex Turcotte to really turn into a top 6 forward at this point. And we've seen Alex Laferriere kind of blossom into that possible role as well. So it's been great to see Alex Turcotte get his chance, stay healthy, and is making a lot of it. Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, these two guys continue to be amazing together. Obviously, they team up on the first goal of the game. Both have been red hot. Unfortunately, the Kings couldn't really get sparked by that goal with 33 seconds into the game because really the rest of the first period kind of belonged to Pittsburgh. But once again, Kopitar behind the net with a beautiful pass in front to Kempe. Second straight game they've connected in that way. 7 points in his last 7 games for Anze Kopitar. He's got 20 points in his last 16 games as the future Hall of Famer continues to get it done. Leads the team in points with 35. For Kempe, he has goals now in 5 of the last 7 games. Leads the team with 16 on the season. And did want to mention in a matchup of future Hall of Fame centers, both Anze Kopitar and Pittsburgh's Sidney Crosby each had an assist. Kopitar finished a +1. Crosby was a -1 in the game. Quentin Byfield was hoping the last game where he was my number 1 star of the game, had the goal and the assist in the win over the Rangers, hoping that game could get Q going. And it's not fair to say that can't be the case after just 1 game, but no points for Q. He finished a -1. He lost 7 of 10 faceoffs. He's not been very good in the faceoff circle this year. He did have 1 really good scoring chance in the slot for the Kings on the power play, but unfortunately the save was made. So Q not able to replicate his last game, a great game, into another good game. And this one, we'll see how he does in their next game against Philadelphia. Kevin Fiala, I'm not going to go so far as to say we saw bad Kevin, but he had his ups and downs in this game against Pittsburgh. We talked about the line change he made where he didn't recognize what was going on and didn't get back defensively. Early on the Kings' first power play, if you've been following this, Kevin Fiala has been playing the entire 2 minutes of power play time lately, and it's worked out so far. In this one, though, the first power play the Kings had, he had 2 bad turnovers. One of them led directly to a shorthanded scoring chance for former King Blake Lizotte. Fortunately, Darcy Kuemper was able to make the save on it. That's the kind of play that is going to get you taken off of the power play, not get you to play the entire 2 minutes of power play time. That said, Fiala also had 3 really good scoring chances. Unfortunately, he didn't finish on any of them. Good to see him getting those chances, but he does need to put those away. We talked about the one with him and Tanner Jeannot missing the wide open net on immediate chances. So good to see him getting some chances. He was active, but also had some misplays as well. Finally, Vladislav Gavrikov, another solid defensive game for Gabby. He and Mikey Anderson were out there against Sidney Crosby, and Pittsburgh's leading goal scorer, Ricard Raquel, did a solid job for the most part. Gavrikov actually had a chance to win the game in overtime. He had a breakaway in overtime, and he shot the puck over the net. Obviously, that's not what Gabby does. He is not an offensive defenseman. And even the goals he does score, usually it's on a slap shot or something like that. It would have been amazing to see him pull that off and get an overtime game winner and put the phone to his head there. Unfortunately, though, that did not happen. But another solid game for Vladislav Gavrikov. Some other stats to throw at you. Gavrikov was the only Kings player to have a multi-point game with 2 assists. Kevin Fiala of the Kings with 6 shots on goal. Jacob Moerara had 5. Alex Laferriere, who did have a really good first period, was flying all around. He had 5 hits to lead the team. The Kings' entire defensive core was credited with 4. That's 7 defensemen. Alex Laferriere had 5. Tanner Jeannot and Joel Edmondson each had 3 block shots. Vladislav Gavrikov led the Kings in time on ice as usual, 24 minutes and 38 seconds. Kevin Fiala was the only Kings player that was a -2. Kempe, Kopitar, Turcotte, Mikey Anderson, Gavrikov were the only players in the Kings were a plus. They were all a +1. Are the Kings looking to make a deal with their next opponent? We'll discuss that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, well, 4 down, 3 to go on this 7-game road trip for the Kings, where they are now 2-1-1. Up next, the Kings are in action on Thursday in Philadelphia against the Flyers. Now, you may or may not have seen this. NHL insider Frank Cervelli from the Daily Faceoff recently reported that the Kings and Flyers have had trade talks regarding the Kings acquiring a forward. Now, the only player that makes any kind of sense and might be available is Flyers leading scorer Travis Konechny. He's not a superstar player, but he's a solid player that could help the Kings offensively. Problem is, he just signed an 8-year contract extension. Now, it doesn't kick in this year. It kicks in next year, and he'll make $8.75 million for the next 8 seasons. And then after the season, he also has a full no movement clause that kicks in as well. So if the Flyers were going to trade him, they would have to do it this season. But it's hard to believe that they would trade a guy they just signed to a huge contract to be a cornerstone veteran player that they're trying to build their team around. Now, the Flyers are in a rebuild mode right now. They're kind of flirting a little bit with around a wild card spot, but they didn't make the playoffs last year. Probably not going to make it again this year. But they're trying to build, obviously, forward. They've got a young superstar named Matvei Michkov, who may be the rookie of the year. He's really the guy they're going to build around, but they need other players too, and Konechny seems to be a part of those plans. I don't know of any other player that they have. Like I said, Michkov obviously is not going anywhere. The Flyer fans would burn that arena down if they were to trade him. That's obviously not going to happen. But there's really nobody else, to me, of value. If you're looking for the Kings to try and acquire an impactful offensive player, Travis Konechny would certainly be a guy like that. Again, not a superstar, but a very, very good player. But again, I don't see that happening. And as far as what the Kings would be giving up, we know Vladislav Gavrikov is going to be a UFA at the end of the year. With Drew Doughty coming back, Gavrikov, we can't have him walk for nothing at the end of the year. It would be great to sign him before the end of the season, but I don't see him doing that. I think he wants to test free agency and get the best deal he can. So, how much would the Flyers be interested in Vladislav Gavrikov? And it's certainly they would want something else as well, something, to help their rebuild. Draft picks, a younger prospect for the Kings is a possibility. I'll be honest with you, and I know the Kings and Flyers have history. Over the years, the Kings and Flyers have been able to pull off some trades. Now, there's been a different regime in charge now in Philadelphia, but they did make a trade with the Kings last season with Cal Peterson and Sean Walker going to Philadelphia. Or that was in 2003. So the Danny Briere, who Keith Jones, who are running the Flyers now, they've had a relationship with Rob Blake. They've made trades before, so it's possible. But interesting report. And the Flyers are who the Kings are playing next. I don't see anything happening there. Certainly nothing that's impactful, but that was a report that happened involving the Kings' next opponent. So thought I'd throw it out there and discuss real quick. As far as the Kings in the Pacific Division, we mentioned they picked up a point. So the Kings are now 18-9-4. They've got 40 points. They're 3 points behind Vegas for first place in the Pacific Division. Now 2 points up on Edmonton for the second spot in the Pacific. Kings are the 4th team in the West, 9th team in the NHL to reach the 40-point mark so far on the season. All right, for you everydayers, those of you who listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Wednesday, Jesse Cohen from the All the Kingsmen podcast is going to join us to be our special guest. We'll talk about the Kings so far this season, how they've played of late, and also we'll preview the Kings-Flyers game as well. Thursday, I will be at the Chargers-Broncos Thursday night football game. As soon as that game is over and I get home, I will watch the Kings-Flyers game and then record a show that night. So expect the Thursday night show to be posted very late. It'll be there for you early in the morning when you wake up, maybe on your morning commute or your lunchtime. So you can check that out. And then on Friday, we'll have our typical Kings fan feedback show as well. If you want to get an email in for that show, lockedoneddie@gmail.com is the address. You're always welcome to post your thoughts if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section as well. Stay interact with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.